Thank you very much for having me here today to talk about the Building Bridges program, and especially as it applies to the Binghamton area. I've met with many of you over the last couple of years. It's hard to believe that it's been a couple of years. You may recall I was there, I believe, 2 years ago when we first met to talk about what a Building Bridges program might look like, as well as junior achievement. I'm pretty much going to talk about Building Bridges here today. Then I think a year ago we were on a video conference, and this year we would also be on a video conference if it weren't for the fact that my daughter's getting married and I'll be in Chicago. So I'm taping this now here today, and we're going to send it on up to you so you've got it for the kickoff of the Building Bridges program. I've continued to be thrilled about doing this for New York and for Binghamton. As you know or may know, we started this in Maine probably 20 years ago. I've been doing it in Maine for the last 15 years, and it has been a very effective program. It isn't without its costs, I guess. Excuse me, not that it costs much money, but there has to be a champion, and I do believe that you have a champion there who's going to help support it and keep the program going. The benefits that have accrued to us in our region and across the state, because we have a good 10 or 12 of these Building Bridges programs going on, the benefits accrue both to the school that sends the teachers out into the field. Obviously, their students benefit from that activity as well. And then what we have found is that employers also feel and report that they benefit from the program because they don't get to talk to real live teachers very often either. Usually the only real opportunity they have to talk to teachers is on parent-teacher night when the teachers are telling the parents the bad news. So, not that it's always bad news, but the benefits really go in both directions, and some of those benefits we didn't even anticipate when we started the program. So that's really a short history of the program. It'll work well. It is all up to you. A lot of times we get calls and say, well, how about this, how about that? The truth of the matter is there are no rules except to have fun and do what works for you and your community. So feel free to continue to contact me anytime to answer questions you might have, but the truth of the matter is if it feels good and feels right for you, it's going to work for your community. The concept that we ended up settling on, again, we had lots and lots of different techniques that went into the selection of our sites and all kinds of other things, but the concept we basically ended up settling on was a 3-hour visit, not unlike that 3-hour tour from which they never returned, but a 3-hour visit where we would go in and have a presentation by someone in HR or in leadership at the organization. They would tell us what they did, what they built, what their history was, and that was educational all by itself. Then we would get a tour of the plant, of the facility. Some of those tours were more involved. If you're visiting a shipyard, you might want to spend a half a day there. If you're visiting a law firm, you might spend less time. But we would get a tour from someone in the organization, not necessarily the owner at this point. We often got tours led by a lead person or basically a supervisor who was very close to the work and was able to inform us with a lot of answers to our questions. So there were a lot of concepts like that we worked on. Then the third hour was what we would call a facilitated hour. Not only did it facilitate eating, because we always have goodies. As a matter of fact, that's mandatory. If there's one thing that I would say is mandatory in the program, it is that we continue to have food. So you must have food, and in the afternoon, food groups for adults, typically chocolate, coffee, and chocolate. A lot of our organizations that we visited couldn't provide a whole lot of food, and that was just fine. On the other hand, we had some larger organizations who ended up competing for what we called the best feeder. And I do remember exactly one of our organizations that said, well, we're going to always have it in the boardroom. We'll have our chef whip some things up for us. It was a local hospital. So any of local hospitals there in the audience, remember, you want to be the best feeder. And that was really the extent of the costs. And then we had a facilitator. And again, I understand you have facilitators there, whether they be chamber people, people from the community college, and so on. But the facilitator really is key to the success of the learning, because what the facilitator would do would prep and help build the context within which the visit would occur. So we might have focused in 1 year on small businesses. Then the facilitator would provide the counterweight with a discussion of large businesses. We might have a focus on healthcare, so the facilitator would then have a focus, or at least provide some counter information about the cost of health care equipment. You name the counterweight, the facilitator would be able to do. So that facilitator is in a position to really help a lot and create some what we called aha moments, so that the participants really could place what they just saw in context. And I will give you some examples of some of our visits, and I would then offer some of the aha moments that we stumbled across and began to realize that it was all about finding aha moments, and the facilitator's job was all about trying to create the conditions under which we could discover what otherwise would have been difficult to discover. In terms of pluses and minuses about the program, again, the pluses were that all of the participants win. Employers, the teachers, the schools, the students. Sometimes we had students come with their teachers, or their children would come. So we might have 15 teachers in the class and 15 students, young people, who were just tagging along because it was fun. And again, did I mention there was chocolate? So that was another great thing, because then the kids got really experienced with interacting with adults and asking good questions, not only of us as participants, but the leadership at the organizations. They were asking a lot of questions about whether it be a ship that was being built or potato chips being made. The kids were in a position to ask with a young perspective, well, what are you doing these days about cholesterol in the food? So they would ask a lot of good health questions. So everybody benefited, whether they were formal program participants or not.